Hey there. Hey everyone. Welcome to your weekly live Q&A. As always, you guys have submitted so many good questions. Some that are a little bit more complex, so I can tell that I have a nerdy audience out there, which makes me really excited. And in this Q&A, I'm going to answer all those questions. So if you do have questions you want to ask and you're on with me live, definitely ask them. And you can always submit them in the comments or to my Facebook page if you want to have them answered in the next live Q&A. So next week, there's going to be no Facebook Lives. There's going to be no Facebook Live show. There's going to be no Q&A on Thursday because I'm going on vacation. I'm taking a little vacation. We're going to go houseboating this weekend, and then I'm going to have a bit of a staycation, and then we're actually going to go hiking in the Bugaboos, which is super exciting. It's an amazing area. I'm going to do some rock climbing there with some friends. We have the cabin booked, so it's going to be awesome. So excuse me. Vacation for me. So no Facebook Live, no Q&A next week, but everything is going to start up as usual the week after. So if this is your first time joining me live, let me introduce myself. I'm Kendra Perry. I'm a functional diagnostic nutritionist, and I focus in healthy gut, detox, energy, minerals, all these great things. And if you guys haven't already done so, and I will post the link to this video after I do it, but I do have a contest going on right now, or I guess a draw. I'm just looking for your feedback on the possible creation of a group program. And so all you need to do is fill out the survey. So I'll put the link above for that survey if you guys want to fill it out. I'm going to be announcing the winner tomorrow. You can win a free hair mineral analysis kit plus 60-minute consult from me. So that's valued at about $500. So that's a pretty awesome prize, and I'm going to draw tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. So if you see this and want to enter before then, definitely do. It's a great prize, but really, really thankful to all you guys who have given me the feedback. I have gotten an overwhelming response. So I've been thinking about creating this group program for a long time, but I wasn't sure if people would be interested in it because it wouldn't contain the one-on-one support, but it would make ordering labs and getting the protocols basically like half the price, probably even less, probably even cost like a quarter of the price, just because there's such a high cost of working with me because I'm so booked up. I have so many people contacting me, so it's not cheap to do the one-on-one work with me. So basically taking the one-on-one out of it would make it significantly cheaper. So you would still get your protocol, a very detailed protocol. You'd get access to my members area with all the resources, recipes, sleep, diet, that sort of thing. But you'd be able to access my support in a Facebook group and in weekly coaching calls, kind of like this, where you'd get to ask me questions, that sort of thing, and I would explain them to you. I also have lots of resources about understanding your results. So it would be significantly cheaper, and honestly, I've gotten such an overwhelming response. People seem like they're really into it, so it looks like I'm going to be creating it, and I'm hoping that it will be available in the next month or two. So stay tuned for that. So I want to get into the questions that I have today. I got a lot of questions, and like I said, some really nerdy questions, which always makes me really excited. So the first question, can SIBO cause chronic erosive gastritis? Also, I don't have H. pylori. So I actually had to look up what chronic erosive gastritis is because I didn't actually know what it was. So my answer, because I'm not super educated in that condition, is I'm not sure, but I would say that it is fully possible because with SIBO, it is a primary cause of things like leaky gut. So that's when you get this increased permeability of the gut so that a lot of the things that you eat or consume actually end up in your bloodstream. And once they're in the bloodstream, they initiate an immune response. They can make your immune system very overactive, and the result can be autoimmune conditions, a lot of inflammation where your immune system is attacking various tissues of your body. So that could be sort of like the long-term issue with something like that. So I would say possible because I know with the methane dominant SIBO, those methanogens can bind to the lining of the gut, and they can cause a leaky gut and a lot of inflammation, a lot of issues. And so when I looked up the chronic erosive gastritis, it looks like there's lesions and bleeding and ulcers. And I would say it's fully possible. You know, how everyone experiences their symptoms with various conditions is 100% individual. And it's really amazing what type of symptoms I've seen people have with various conditions. So I might have 10 different clients with SIBOs, but they all have very different presentations. Everyone is very different. So I would say it's absolutely possible. And if you think you have SIBO or you have SIBO, then I would definitely be addressing it to see if it would be something that helps with that. So the other question I would have for you is, how do you know you don't have H. pylori? Because I know with like ulcers, typically there is H. pylori at the root of it, especially if it's stomach ulcers. And I would just ask, like, what was the test that was used to tell you didn't have H. pylori? Because a lot of the conventional testing isn't very accurate. And it might miss it. So I would be, and I've seen even the most accurate tests miss it. I've seen it missed on the GI map a couple times, even though that's not super common. So I would just want to make sure I would be running something like a GI map or a 401H to detect the H. pylori, because typically that's going to be what causes it, and most tests are not adequate to diagnose it properly. So that would be my answer to that. So I hope that helps. Okay. So next question is, what do you think of these places that do DNA testing to find out what your disease risks are? Methylation power, hormone wellness, inflammation, detoxification. Okay, so I actually do, surprise, surprise, have some opinions on DNA testing. So honestly, I don't think it's the best use of your money, and this is why. So genes don't determine your future. They're not like a death sentence. They don't guarantee that you're going to have a specific condition. So I've run a DNA test. I've done 23andMe, and I had like so many different mutations that possibly predispose you for all kinds of diseases, but I don't have those diseases. And that's because you can actually affect the expression of your genes. And so just because you have a mutation for something does not guarantee that you're actually going to have that issue. And just because you don't have a mutation for something doesn't mean you're not going to have that issue. So a really good example is MTHFR, the methylation mutation, because you could have that defect in the gene, but you can still have methylation issues, even if you don't have that defect. And that's because a lot of things affect methylation. Mineral imbalances, heavy metals, gut infections, stress, all these things can affect methylation. So just because you don't have a mutation doesn't mean you may not have that issue. But just because you have a mutation doesn't mean you're going to have that problem. So it's almost a bit of a crapshoot. And really, I think it's been pretty well shown that treating genes doesn't work. We really need to work on the environmental sources. So I like to think of it like genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger. Bang, bang. So really, what we do in health and functional health is we are working on the environment and bringing the environment into a better place so that we can have positive expression of those genes. So I've seen people with the methylation mutation that means they don't methylate, but they methylate fine because we did the work and we got them healthy. So I would say that, and honestly, that test it's very overwhelming because you're going to see that you have all kinds of predispositions for all these different health problems and conditions. And that might worry you a lot. And really, like, we can't control our genes, but we can affect gene expression. We have a huge control over gene expression. So I don't run DNA tests. It's usually the last thing I would ever look at because there is just so much we can do environmentally, diet-wise, sleep-wise, stress, gut-wise, mineral-wise, that actually can affect gene expression and cause us to affect or express genes in a way that is positive and that promotes health. So that's my opinion on that. I mean, they are kind of cool tests. It's interesting to look at. You get to see what your heritage is. You can get connected with relatives and then show up on their doorstep in Italy and be like, hey, I'm your 5th cousin or like 23rd cousin, whatever. But, you know, beyond that, like I would say, like, if you're going to be investing in functional testing, that is not the test that I would invest in. That would be my recommendation. So good question. Thank you for asking. Okay, so next question. If you guys are on live and you have any questions for me, go for it. You can ask them in the comments box. I will answer them. Are smoothies okay to have for breakfast if eating meat is just a big mental challenge, but still putting protein powder into the smoothie with some good fat? So I definitely tend to steer people away from smoothies in the morning. I actually was just speaking with a client today who was eating a smoothie. And the reason is for this is because it's a very cold breakfast. And from a Chinese medicine perspective, they would call that dampness. And we really want to, like, when the first meal of the day should be a hot meal. We want to stimulate, we want to kind of like boost that metabolism. And I find people that do eat a lot of cold or raw foods do tend to have a lot of gut issues. Alicia says warm smoothies because it may have been her that I was speaking with this morning. I can't even remember. I spoke to so many people today. But yeah, like heat up the smoothie. Maybe that's not the most appetizing, but you could have a warm smoothie. Something that's a little bit warmer that just helps stimulate that digestive fire, kind of fires up the metabolism. So yeah, just you don't need to make it hot, but maybe doing more of like a warm smoothie. Maybe some of the veggies that you put in a smoothie, I would recommend maybe doing a quick steam of them beforehand, kind of breaking them down so they're not raw. That can be really helpful. Typically, I like people to eat a hotter breakfast, like dinner leftovers, bacon, eggs, that sort of thing. But yeah, like I get it that some people maybe eating breakfast is difficult. So I would maybe try to focus on a warmer smoothie, something that is just a little bit better at firing up that digestion. So that would be my recommendation for that. Okay. Great question. Thanks for asking. Okay. So next question. If far infrared sauna exacerbates my rosacea, what else can I do? I finally got the rosacea somewhat under control with the use of some awesome creams, and I don't want to be walking around looking like red fire hydrant for hours after the sauna. Yeah. So, I mean, sauna is not for everyone. I would typically go with, I think I've talked about it a lot, like a Juve light or the red, hey Chelsea, or like a red near infrared light. Those don't produce a lot of heat, and I find they can be really helpful for rosacea. But then that being said, everyone is different. So the thing with rosacea is, all skin issues are very much rooted in gut and detoxification. Also possible copper toxicity. So I see a lot of skin flare-ups and redness to be related to copper because there's a lot of connections between copper and histamine. And so histamine is a neurotransmitter, but when it gets upregulated or it doesn't get broken down properly, it causes the flushing. The histamine is what happens when we have an allergic reaction, like we get a rash or we, flare up from a bee sting. That's from the histamine, and that's why you take a Benadryl because it's an antihistamine. So I would say if rosacea is an issue, I would be looking into a possible low histamine diet. So foods that are high in histamines would be things like wine, usually cured meats. Leftovers tend to be high in histamines. Certain cheeses, certain nuts and seeds. It's not the most fun diet, and it's definitely not going to fix anything, but it can prevent the rosacea. So I would be looking into histamines and be considering a low histamine diet. You can also look into something that stabilizes mast cells, because mast cells are these little cells in the stomach, and when they get unstabilized, they release a lot of histamine. So quercetin can be really helpful for that, and also a DAO inhibitor. I know Seeking Health has histamine block, which can be really helpful for that. So that would be things to toy with. But the long-term fix is to address gut infections, open up the detox pathways, and do minerals. Check for possible copper toxicity. And if you've done a mineral panel and you're a slow oxidizer, but your copper's not high, there's a good chance that it's just still there. Just at this point, your metabolism doesn't have enough energy to actually immobilize the copper. So yeah, so those would be things I would look into. So I hope that helps. Okay, this next question is a good one. Can someone actually get off thyroid medication if the gut is in good order and other minerals, etc., good diet are in place? So yes, it is possible. I've seen it frequently. Not all the time, but it's definitely possible. And it really depends on the reason why the thyroid is out of balance to begin with. Is it diet? Is it gluten sensitivity? Is it gut issues? Is it minerals? All those things. And if you can address all those things and maybe the situation hasn't been going on for that long, like yes, I see people get off thyroid meds all the time, especially when I'm doing an iodine protocol with them. That does tend to be really helpful. But at a very least, like when you do this work, you can get on possibly the lowest dose possible, the lowest dose of that medication that you possibly need. And yeah, I would say it's probably less likely if there's Hashimoto's. With Hashimoto's, it is harder to get off, especially if there's an autoimmune process. You've had Hashimoto's for a really long time and your thyroid is physically damaged, then yeah, you may not be able to get off it because maybe there's not enough thyroid gland to actually produce the hormone. So that is possible as well. So I would say it's totally possible, but if it is something you want to do, you kind of have to throw the kitchen sink at it. So you got to do the testing. You got to, figure out what's going on in the gut. You got to, you got to address the mineral system, especially. You got to get off gluten. You need to get off inflammatory foods, that sort of thing, and just work with a really good practitioner to get you off of it, because I think it is possible and I have seen it, but it's not possible in everyone. So it just depends. Okay. So Hi, suggestions for current curing delayed stomach emptying, gastroparesis. As a result, I developed SIBO. My gut is inflamed and bloated constantly, and I feel full fast. So typically, like if there's SIBO and you're having delayed stomach emptying, there can be a few things that stimulate it. Obviously, you do need to get rid of the SIBO because the SIBO does affect the bowel transit time in some cases. So I would definitely be wanting to address the SIBO. I would also be looking into a prokinetic. So a prokinetic is something that stimulates the nerves of the migrating motor complex, which is basically this like little rippling effect that happens that prevents bacteria from moving up the GI tract. And in a healthy person, happens about 40 times a day. In SIBO people, maybe doesn't happen or only a couple times a day. So really good prokinetics would be high doses of ginger extract. Iberogast is a herbal formula that is very typically used to stimulate the migrating motor complex in SIBO people, and Modal Pro from Pure Encapsulation. So I would be looking into that. That might be possible temporary relief, and then addressing the SIBO. I would also be wanting to look at are there other infections, because sometimes what happens is these bigger infections like parasites actually paralyze the gastrointestinal tract and prevent that kind of flushing motion, that migrating motor complex, and the delayed stomach emptying. So I would be wanting to run a gut panel, see if there's other infections. I would also be looking at thyroid, because thyroid can affect the metabolism, so it will affect transit time. And if there is something like a sluggish thyroid, then that is going to greatly affect the delayed stomach emptying. I would also be looking into, as long as you don't have H. pylori, I'd be looking into betaine HCl or hydrochloric acid. That can actually help break down some of the food and make you feel less full. So those are the things that I would be interested in looking into. So I hope that helps. And I have one more question. What do you do to treat a calcium shell? So a few different things. And so this is basically, if you're just tuning in and you're like, what the fuck is a calcium shell? It's basically just a very common mineral pattern that I see where calcium starts building up in the soft tissue. So typically you want calcium to be in the bone and the teeth, but it ends up building in the soft tissue due to other mineral imbalances, typically low sodium, low potassium, and elevated copper, also iodine deficiency. So breaking up the calcium shell, you have to address the iodine deficiency, especially if it's a severe calcium shell. They will need to go on an iodine protocol, addressing possible copper toxicity if it's present. Vitamin K2 is very good at putting calcium where it belongs, so pulling it from the soft tissue and pushing it into the teeth and the bone. Sometimes thyroid support is needed, like doing like a T3 only medication can be really helpful, especially if people have high reverse T3, which is basically the inactive form of T3. If you have high reverse T3, you're really fatigued. And so when the body is making thyroid hormone, it makes T4, which is inactive, and it can go one of two ways, towards T3, which is active, or towards reverse T3. And if it's going towards reverse T3, taking glandulars or Synthroid may not help with you, so you would want to do T3 only. So that would be a prescription from a doctor. Vitamin A is also helpful at breaking up the calcium shell. And then emotional work, because a lot of times the reason why people have the calcium shell is because their body is numbing out. There's something that has happened in their life that their body can't deal with, because the calcium literally is forming like this shell around your cell, and it numbs you out from a stress response. So if you have a calcium shell, it may be that your body did it on purpose to protect you from some sort of emotional crap that you are just not ready to deal with. So doing some counseling, EMDR I found to be very powerful for breaking up the calcium shell and helping people kind of unpack what they aren't able to deal with and kind of organizing it in the brain and letting them deal with it. So I would say emotional work is pretty important because like when you do break up a calcium shell, people are going to experience their emotions. And that's one of the biggest things. They will start to experience what they maybe were trying to prevent themselves from feeling. So I have a client recently, she lost a family member, and she had a very high calcium shell. And she was definitely like, I didn't even cry when it happened. Like I just kind of numbed out from it and kind of pushed it deep down. And so she's been doing some EMDR, loving it, having a really, really good experience. And yeah, so I think that's a big part of it, or at least having that emotional support that when you do start breaking up the calcium shell, that you're not going to go off the deep end, because yeah, you're going to start feeling things again. Okay, so that is your live Q&A. I hope that was helpful. Again, if you guys want to enter the contest to win the free hair mineral analysis test, you just need to fill out my survey. I'm going to add the link to the top of this video as soon as I'm done recording here. I'm going to draw the winner tomorrow. So yeah, probably tomorrow afternoon. So as long as you get that in as soon as possible before tomorrow afternoon, you will be entered to win. Okay, thanks guys. I hope you guys have a really great week, a really great weekend, and I'll see you guys in about 2 weeks from now. There will be no Facebook Lives, Q&A, or live show next week. I will be on vacation, taking some time off, but I think I'm returning for the following Tuesday, and then the following Thursday for the Q&A. So if you have questions, you can submit them for 2 weeks from now. Okay, guys, have a fantastic weekend. I will talk to you soon.